Well, good morning. Merry Christmas. Let's see, I've watched too many of the Home Alone movies. Not possible. Yeah, I won't say what's come to mind. My name's Kevin. I'm one of the pastors here on staff, and I am thrilled that you are here this morning. And this morning we are finishing not finishing, I don't know, is this finishing? We finished the pictures. Do we finish the pictures on Christmas Eve? Christmas Eve. So you have to come back for one more picture. And this morning is peace. And there's some irony in that, because the last couple weeks have been anything but peaceful. They've been somewhat chaotic. And if you are new to Journey, I'm so glad you're here. What I'm about to say isn't going to make any sense to you. And it is, we are thankful that you chose to come and worship with us this morning. If you've been a part of Journey for a while, then you know that last week, Jamie George, our lead pastor for the last 13, 14 years, resigned. And I want to just tell you that your emails, texts, phone calls that you've sent to the staff and the elders have meant a lot. You've touched us, you've encouraged us, and we thank you. You've been loving us well. I honestly, my range of emotions have been all over the map, but I also want you to know that I've known about this longer than I guess anyone has, that it was coming and what was happening. And so with that, I've had a little longer to process my emotions than most of you, but it's still, there are hard days. I thought I was going to partner with Jamie for the next 10 years. So there's a degree of loss, there's a degree of hurt, betrayal. There's a number of things that go on, and you might experience any number of those emotions, and that's okay. If you need to process with someone, staff, me, anybody, elder, friend, just let us know. We want to help. But we're also people that have come to the realization that this was not Jamie's church, it's God's church. It's Jesus' church. And our future, we believe, is extremely bright. He's put us here for a reason. And it wasn't merely because Jamie was our pastor. It was because this is where the light of what this church stands for needs to shine the brightest. So we are excited. I'm excited about our future. Again, I've had a little more time to process, and we want to allow you time to process. And we're going to speak to it. We're not afraid of it. We know that what God has for us is big and huge, and we're trusting Him with our future. Just so you know, please be praying for Jamie and Angie and their family, their transition, what they're going through, and also pray for those that were hurt by what happened in this. But also, we did set up a benevolent fund for helping them with the cancer treatments that Angie is going to be going through. So if you want to love them in that way, yeah, feel free to give to that, and we'll make sure they are helped that way. It seems really odd that in light of all that is happening around us, that the irony of speaking on peace this morning kind of strikes me. And it is the fourth word of the Advent, but I want to tell you a story as we start. And this last week, Lori and I went to visit my mom and my siblings in West Virginia. And to get to West Virginia, you have to drive through Kentucky. Ever drive through Kentucky? It's amazing, especially when all the leaves are gone and the grass is no longer green. But anyway, we spent a little bit of a holiday with my family, and we returned on Friday. And on our drive back, I was actually anticipating a little bit of traffic because it's the holiday. But I guess on Friday, the week before Christmas in Kentucky, there still isn't any traffic. So just so you're aware, you can drive through probably Kentucky at any time and not hit traffic. But we left, we drove back, and it was in the morning, and on the way back, Lori decided to watch The Crown on her phone. You know what that is, right? Good, because I don't. So it's the history of something. And so she was sitting in the passenger seat. I love to drive. It's one of my favorite things to do, and especially when there's no traffic, and I can put the cruise control on, and I put on Pandora, my 70s mix. Eagles, Chicago, Journey, Foreigner. No, but anyway, so I've kind of settled into my spot. I could put the cruise control on, 75. You pass a few, you get past a little bit, but there's hardly no traffic. So we're cruising through, and I'm in a great place. Peace has settled upon me, singing along with the Eagles and driving through Kentucky. Nothing like it. And so as we're driving through, I come up on a Subaru Outback that is in the right lane, and I'm going a little faster, so I pull in the left lane and pull up alongside this car to pass it. And there were no other cars around us, literally in sight. And all of a sudden, this Subaru decides to turn into the left lane. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. So there wasn't enough time to stop and get behind so I literally had to go into the ditch. And I said to Lori, hold on. So we went into the ditch and slowed down, got control of the car, and that peaceful, easy feeling that I had, you guys are right with me, quickly vanished. And there was this moment of, holy cow, right? You ever been in a peaceful place and somebody quickly takes you out of it, just tears you out of it? Well, I was able to get the car under control, and thankfully, in the middle of Kentucky, they don't even have signs out, nothing. And so I was able to get it back up on the road, and we started driving again. And it took a little while for me to allow the adrenaline to calm down and start listening to music again, and peace settled on me once again. But you know what it's like, right? You've got that moment in life where you're going, I'm just at peace right now. And then something happens. A Subaru happens. And you're in the ditch, and you're trying to get control, and you can't, and it's like, wow, how did this happen? Because there was no reason for this person to switch lanes, none whatsoever. And there I was, trying to figure out why I was driving in the ditch. So with that, having lost my peaceful, easy feeling, which I am so glad you guys got that. See, when I was growing up in the 70s, peace was actually a greeting. Peace, man. Because we were living in a time of great turmoil. The Vietnam War, a bunch of different things going on. There was impeachments, resigning. Oh no, impeachments now. It was Nixon resigning in those days. But turmoil is a part of life, really. Turmoil is controversy. It is those things that feel out of control. And in the 70s, it was a reaction to what was believed to be an unjust war. And we've had more since then, and we've had more unrest, and there's a whole lot that goes on around us. And we begin to wonder, is this peace even available? Is peace an option? Is peace really something that we should be striving for? There are times when I go, like, when they tell us there's one more peace accord for the Middle East, they're going to get them all together, and they're going to, really? We're going to try this again. But the striving for peace is part of humanity. It's part of our desire. If you polled humanity, if you just got them all together and said, okay, what is the one thing you would wish for all mankind? And if you've seen Miss Congeniality, you know the answer. World peace and fast food. But there's a degree of, if we could, this elusive thing. But we live in a time of war and rumors of war, conflict. If we could all just get along, right? If we could just get along, there'd be peace. I remember in the summers during my elementary years, me and my brothers were a source of unrest for my mom. My mom worked nights as a nurse, and so she would sleep during the day. Well, we slept at night. And during the day, we were left oftentimes, most of the time, to our own devices. And there were times from my mom's bedroom we would hear, "Could I just get a little peace and quiet?" To which we would respond, "Yikes," because we were not a source of peace and quiet. 3 brothers, all in elementary school, left to their own devices. I've got scars. So what is it about peace that makes it so hard to capture and keep? That's really the question. The question is, what is it? And I want to tell you that peace is actually an inner calm, not an external calm. See, I think sometimes we look for peace in our external life so that it finds its way into our being. The reality of it is it works the other way, is that when we get an inner calm or inner stillness or an inner at peace, it has a tendency to flow around us. It affects those around us. So what makes it so hard? I think what makes it hard is that it fluctuates. It's elusive. And oftentimes we are depending on our circumstances to give us peace. And they just don't. Because at any given day, people we love can be going through a struggle and it steals our peace. Our friends, our spouses, our children, our parents, our football team. And it steals our peace. If I'm honest, if you would wrestle with this with me a little bit, is that for me, the primary emotion that steals my peace is fear. It is at times for me, it is my constant companion. It's my primary emotion. I work out of that. I deal with it, I confess it, I wrestle with it. Yours may be anger, yours may be indifference, yours may be any number of things. I don't know what yours is. Mine happens to be fear. And when I am not at peace, I know that my fear has overwhelmed me. And so I have to wrestle with that. Just like if you're really angry, your peace is gone because your anger has overwhelmed your peace. So with that, for me, it often hits me in the middle of the night. I've shared this before a little bit, but for me, I don't feel emotions right away in situations that I find myself in. You may feel emotions right away. I have to process. I live through my mind. I live through my head, so it takes me a minute. So when all of this happened with Jamie, it took me a while to process. It took me a couple days to really realize the deep effect that it was going to have on me. So I found out about a month ago. So for me, I've had a month to process. But in the middle of the night, when I feel deeply, that's when I feel deeply, is when I wake up in the middle of the night. I had thoughts of betrayal, anger, sadness, all of those things. I really did believe that Jamie and I were going to be able to work together for another decade, at least. And it makes me really sad. But as I process that and I work through that, you will work through it in your own way, depending upon your relationship with Jamie and depending upon how you process your emotions. And that's fine. Again, I want to reiterate to you, we get it, and we want to help. In the next breath, I also want to say is there's a bright future for Journey Church. And so I want to keep you in that place. I want to keep you in the places that we're gonna move forward. We're not going to forget Jamie. We're going to move forward. And we find ourselves in a place of needing peace. And what's happened to me over this last week is peace has settled on me again. Because we're beginning to see the future. We're beginning to see what's next. And we're coming into Christmas. For me, Christmas is like the holiday of the year. It is the demonstration of God's love. It is the beginning of redemption in many ways. It is the start of the incarnation. It is the moment we begin to get our eyes on God in the flesh. And so as I wake up and I feel deeply, you may too. We are going to go through this together. It's just a season. The future is different than we thought it was going to be, but that's okay. At what point did I or you get guaranteed what we know the future will be anyway? The future is really in God's hands, and we travel this journey. He's the main narrative. God has set up the narrative, and he's invited us into his narrative, and we know that he's good, and we know that he invites us into his story. And so whereas we're a part of his story, this is part of the story. And he's in charge of the story. Well, back to this story about getting run off the road. So initially I got on the road, and in my mind I was like, okay, I'm feeling emotions, and I'm going to catch that car. But then rational thought took over, and I didn't want to get a ticket, and so I just put it back on cruise control at about 76. I notched it up a little bit and started across Kentucky. And passed a few cars. And let me tell you, when I came to the next car to pass, I was like, dude, stay in your lane. You know, you learn something from a bad experience. You learn something from, okay, I got to really pay attention to what this guy's doing or not doing. And so time went on, and it took us about a half an hour. We cut up to the car. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to pass him really fast because I don't want to happen again. And so I'm in my, and so we drive by this car, and it's a person sitting there totally oblivious to what's going on around them. The sun was shining in such a way that it was going in the side of the car, so they had their sun visor to the left, and so you could only really see through their window. And so I was like, okay, lesson learned. They just were oblivious to the fact that I was there. There was nothing intentional. This person didn't get up that morning and go, I'm going to run the Dixons off the road this morning. And oftentimes we attribute intent where there is none. And it steals our peace. It steals from us. And so as we sped by, no hand gestures, no nothing. And on we went. And I turned the music back on. Lori finished watching The Crown. We made it back. It was an uneventful trip other than that one moment. But it's jarring. There's no such thing as uneventful life. Life has its circumstances. It has its moments. And oftentimes, those moments are done by people that have no clue that they've just run you off the road. No clue. That car just went on blissfully. No agitation in their soul. But there they go. And I'm in the ditch. That's kind of how life is. It's kind of how it works. There is a sense of where if we allow those things, if we allow the circumstances of life to steal from us, they steal our joy, they steal our peace, they steal from us our hope, then we're allowing the circumstances of life to determine the condition of our souls. I wrestle with it. I'm sure you've got to wrestle with it. Another emotion that actually does steal peace from people, and is probably one of the most common, is anxiety. Anxiety is one of those things that arises out of feelings that are out of our control. That was out of my control. What happened to me that day was out of my control. It didn't cause me anxiety. It caused me other things, but it was one of those moments. But for many of us, our emotions can easily slip into anxiety if we let them. Our peace is chased away because we're feeling anxious. And anxiousness is that feeling of being out of control. Philippians 4:4-7 says this. Before I read this, you've heard these verses before. Actually, I think Susie referred to them when she spoke on joy. And they're not platitudes, and they're not just nice words. They're actually practices of the faith. And in Philippians 4, we hear this, and sometimes we go, oh, that sounds nice, but I don't think it's possible. I want to give context to it. I want to give you a little bit of more of it being a practice rather than just words that fall over my ears and then I move back to anxiety. So it's beginning with verse 4, it says, "Rejoice in the Lord always. I say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." When I first started taking tests, I can't remember if it was in high school or if it was in college, I would have anxiety about it. And it wasn't because I didn't think I was prepared. It was because I wasn't sure what was going to be on the test. Because I couldn't control the person making the test. And so oftentimes I found myself studying stuff I didn't need to study because who knows what they'll put on the test. Anybody get anxiety when you take a test? Okay, good. And so with that came the need for me to practice something different. And so I learned these verses. I actually memorized these verses when I was a freshman in college. And I began to understand what it meant to pray and petition God with your requests that leads me to a place of peace. And so, in essence, what I would do would be, I would say a prayer. I say, Lord, I've done all I can. I've studied what I could. I know what I know. And now I'm just trusting you with what I don't know. And I'm going to trust you with the making of this test. I'm going to put it in your hands. And I could go into the test, I wouldn't get anxiety, and I would take the test. Sometimes I'd do great, sometimes I wouldn't. I was a very average student. And with that, I had peace. Because it was a practice. The practice was, I came to realize is that I couldn't control a lot of what was happening around me. And so peace came when I said to God, okay, you are in charge of what I cannot control. I can only control myself. I can only control what I study. And there were times when I didn't study and I went into tests, did poorly, and that had nothing to do with God. It had everything to do with me. And then there were times when I studied really hard, went into a test, and did poorly because I studied the wrong stuff. It had nothing to do with God. It had to do with me. But I didn't have anxiety. The point wasn't how well I did on the test. The point was how I could go into a test with peace. See, I don't know what causes you anxiety, but I do know this. If it might be I have anxiety because I have to go visit my family. I have anxiety because I have to drive Highway 65 today. I might have anxiety because I don't know how my spouse is going to react to the fact that I was in the ditch this weekend. I mean, you can have anxiety about a million things, and I want to bring you into this place. I want to bring you into this place where you cannot control what other people do, and you cannot control the circumstances around you, but you are part of a bigger narrative where God is in charge of those things, and as you step into that and you lean into that, your peace is going to come from acknowledging the fact that you cannot control them, and you turn them over to Him. And so with prayer and petition and thanksgiving, you turn over to God what belongs to God, and you keep what belongs to you. You can control your your reaction. And so with that, I want to invite you into this idea that walking with God is a peace that is the calming of the spirit, the calming of the soul. It's the release of anxiety, because that practice of depending on God for what you cannot control moves us to a place of peace. Peace is the absence of agitation. Some of you are like, yeah, but I got 3 little kids. Yeah, I get it. Agitation. It is the calm in our spirit, even when everything around us feels chaotic and out of control. Peace is the tranquility that comes when perspective is restored, when the struggle stops, when we rest and sleep is welcomed. Just want to dwell on the word perspective for just a second, because oftentimes peace is absent because we only have our perspective. And our perspective is often myopic. And what I mean by myopic is it's self-centered, it's our center. And when our perspective comes from our center, we don't have God's perspective. And when we don't have God's perspective, our peace is elusive. Because when God enters the picture, when God comes into the story, we begin to recognize that the perspective of God is merely, I am a player in the story, not the star of the story. And the more that we live there, the more likely it is that we will have peace. Peace is most elusive when we try to control all that is around us. But I'd also say peace is elusive when God feels distant. God is always present, and God is always with us. But there are times when we feel that God is distant and away from us. And when we feel God is distant, peace is elusive. Because really what we're trying to do is manufacture peace out of our own being rather than allowing God to manufacture that peace in us. And the reality is when we're trying to really manufacture peace apart from God, it's not really peace at all. It's something else. It is a false sense of calm. It is self-assuredness rather than dependence on God. And self-assuredness is a dangerous place to find peace. When I feel something is bigger than God. Have you ever faced something, you come up against something, and there was moments like this for me over these last few weeks. It feels like, oh, this feels big. This feels really big. This feels bigger than God. I never said it out loud, but my feelings were saying it to me. There's no peace in that. When I make God small, when I make him fit into what I understand my problem to be and I don't see him as the solution to it, I've now eliminated the option for peace. And so when we do that, it's evident to us that our trust in God has moved us to a place of self-dependence, at least for me. Another time when peace is elusive is when I don't trust what God is going to do. There's one thing is something, when we see God as small, it's one thing, but when we don't trust what God is going to do in that circumstance, peace is like, oh, I know I'm supposed to turn this over to God, but God might actually do this instead of this. God might actually fix the problem in a way that I don't want it fixed. No peace in that. And the last, I think peace is elusive when we won't be still. I think there's a correlation, I believe there's a correlation between being still and understanding what peace is. This is difficult for me. I'd much rather work something out than be still. I'd much rather engage in the solution than be still. But oftentimes peace, I would say most of the time, maybe all the time. That's a risk for me to say all the time. That peace is, that a requirement for peace is to be still. And it may just be. Psalm 46:10 gives the equation of peace. He says, in verse 10, he says, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth." Be still and know that I'm God. That is a nice phrase to put above the mantle in your fireplace in your living room. But let's dwell on it for just a second. Be still requires us to stop trying to fix what only God can fix. We position ourselves in a place before God, and we say, okay, I'm still, I'm ready. I want to experience your peace. But then he tacks on, and know that I am God. This is a deep and abiding faith in knowing that who I am about to engage with is bigger than me, larger than me, the sustenance of my life, and I'm part of his narrative. Know that I am God. See, if we're still before God and he's not God, then we become our own God. I can't practice peace without a deep trust of God. That's what he's saying. I can't practice peace without being still. Peace apart from God is an illusion. It is to place your trust in something or someone else that ultimately will fail you, including yourself. So how does peace fit at Christmas time? I want to read for you Isaiah 9, 6 and 7. "For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders. And he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the greatness of his government and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever. And the zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this." Prince of Peace? What does that mean? It means that Jesus is the embodiment of peace. His title isn't just a title, it is a descriptor. It describes who he is. It describes his essence. He is a person of peace. You ever been around a person of peace? You ever been around one of those calm souls in the midst of great chaos? You ever been around that person that in the midst of great trouble, they're at peace? It's infectious. You can latch on a little bit. You can feed off of their peace. The person who is hysterical, the person who loses their mind in an emergency needs somebody full of peace to embody it. And so what we see in the life of Jesus, in the person of Jesus, is the embodiment of peace. There's a couple of instances in Scripture, stories where we're told that Jesus embodies peace. He demonstrates his peace in a boat on the Sea of Galilee where their storm comes up, and he tells the seas to be still. Still is key there. And it calms down, and we have peace. Even in uncontrolled circumstances where nature is unhinged, Jesus embodied peace. He was unfrazzled. He was calm in his soul. Peace is found in how much in how much you really trust in that person of Christ. Not only did he show it there, he showed it in the middle of a mob. His hometown wanted to throw him off a cliff. And he calmly just walked right through them. Even when people are out of control, Jesus was the Prince of Peace. He demonstrated his peace on that night that he was arrested and crucified. He could have walked away, and he chose to stay. And he was a calming influence because God had a bigger plan. He's the embodiment of peace. If you want to know what peace is, we look there. And for us that need to practice this and come kind of lean into this idea of peace, if you want to find peace, it's rooted in these ideas. It's rooted in, first, this idea. It is found in the sovereignty of God. I know that's kind of, again, a flippant statement. You may have heard it a few times. But the sovereignty of God is the deep belief that he's got it under control. Believing he is ultimately the keeper of the stories. That he ultimately is working all things together. That he is the sovereign one. And nothing happens apart from him. So peace resting in that. But for many of us, that's a abstract, difficult thing to believe in. Because peace is also found in how much you trust the sovereignty of God. It isn't just enough at times to say, I believe in the sovereignty of God, because that can sound like dismissive. But how much do you really trust the sovereignty of God is the next question. Without a deep trust in the sovereignty of God, that he is good, that he is going to act on behalf of his people, that he is ultimately in charge. And we can trust his character, and we can trust his heart, and we can trust all those things about him. And therefore, with the trust in his sovereignty, we find peace. Because ultimately, trust is rooted in whether or not you believe in the heart of God. Do I trust the heart of God? And that lands us squarely at Christmas. Jesus is the embodiment of the heart of God. Jesus is the embodiment of the heart of God, the Prince of Peace. There is a deep love. To trust in the sovereignty of God is to trust in the love of God. It is to trust in the heart of God. It is to trust that God is going to do the right thing. It is to trust in Jesus, because now we see the manifestation, the picture. We put our eyes on God when we look at Jesus. And we go, oh, how he loved us. And I can have peace. Because the God who sent his son loved me. And I can trust that. Because it wasn't merely words, it was a demonstration. So let me ask you, do you trust God enough to allow peace to come over you? I'm going to ask you to take a moment right now. I'm going to ask the band to come up and just posture yourself. Just put yourself in a place where you can look at the floor or close your eyes. And I want to just walk you through a moment of being still. I want to invite you into being still. We live in a time, in a place, in a world where it's difficult to find a place to be still. Because sometimes when you're driving across Kansas or Kentucky, when you have a nice, peaceful, easy feeling, you get bumped off the road. And so you have to recenter. You have to come back to center. You have to come back to places where you are in relationship with God, but you're still before him. And you begin to recognize again that he is God. And so with that, just for a second, be still before Jesus. And as you're sitting across from him, I just want you to hand him the things that are causing you anxiety, getting your Christmas shopping done, whatever that might be. Those things that are causing you to fear the future. Stealing your peace. Identify the thing that is stealing your peace. As you give it to Jesus, as you hand those things over, allow peace to sink into your soul. And tell him he can keep whatever you gave him. Jesus, thank you that you're so willing to engage us in our frailties, that you desperately want peace to reign in us. Thank you that you're so kind and forgiving and compassionate. And I pray for us. I pray for us that we would be filled with your Spirit, that peace would reign in our souls, that would overflow into the lives around us, that it could be contagious, that we would know that a part of loving well is to share the peace that we have with others. May our hearts leap as we contemplate the incarnation, the coming of Jesus. May our hearts leap knowing that you've got it in control and that we don't have to have it in control. And may that peace dwell richly in our souls. Peace that surpasses all understanding, because it's rooted in you, the Prince of Peace. Almighty God, the incarnation of the Prince of Peace. It's in his name